What if I told you that the most beautiful man to ever walk the earth wasn't born from a mother's womb, but from the bark of a weeping tree? That his life wasn't one of fortune, but of obsession, rivalry, and an ending so tragic that even the gods themselves mourned? This is no ordinary love story. This is the tale of Adonis, a man so breathtaking that two goddesses fought over him. A mortal so captivating that his very existence altered the balance of life and death itself. His story is one of passion and peril, where love was not a gift, but a battlefield. Raised in the underworld, desired by Aphrodite, envied by Ares, and cursed by fate, Adonis became more than just a man, he became a symbol. But what was it about him that made the gods themselves abandon reason? Was it his beauty alone, or was there something far more powerful at play? You may think you know Greek mythology, but Adonis' tale is not just another legend, it is a reflection of something deeper, something that still echoes through time. What happens when desire turns into obsession? When love becomes possession? And most of all, what price must be paid for perfection? Stay with me, because this story is about to take you into the depths of divine desire, the cruelty of fate, and a beauty so dangerous that it left even the gods powerless. This is Born of a Tree, Loved by Goddesses, the complete story of Adonis, the most beautiful man. Mira and her curse. Legends often carry whispers of beauty so divine that it defies the gods themselves. Princess Mira, daughter of King Cinyras, was born into such a fate. Her beauty was not just admired, it was dangerously exalted. Her mother, in a moment of reckless pride, claimed that Mira's radiance outshone even Aphrodite. It was the kind of arrogance that the gods do not forgive. Aphrodite, wounded by the insult, did not merely seek vengeance, she orchestrated a punishment so cruel that it would twist the very fabric of love itself. After all, if mortals dared to compare themselves to the divine, they would learn the price of such audacity. Curses from the gods are never simple. They do not merely strike, they fester, they consume, they warp reality into something grotesque. Mira, once innocent and untouched by darkness, was ensnared in a horrifying desire. This was no ordinary attraction. It was an unnatural, suffocating obsession with the one man she was never meant to love, her own father. Imagine the torment of a mind battling itself, the horror of knowing one's thoughts are not their own. She resisted, of course. She fought against the pull of Aphrodite's cruel design, but divine curses do not grant escape. They are meant to be suffered. What does one do when they are trapped inside their own mind, fighting urges that should not exist? Mira sought help, but no prayer, no offering, no plea to any deity could lift her torment. Desperate, she turned to her nursemaid, the only soul she dared to trust. The old woman, with a heart too kind or perhaps too obedient, devised a plan. She would trick the king into unknowingly lying with his own daughter, and so, over 12 nights of deception, the curse tightened its grip. Mira's innocence was gone, replaced by a nightmare of her own making, though she was merely a puppet in Aphrodite's cruel theater. But the truth cannot be hidden forever. Shadows always unravel in the presence of light, and so it was that King Cinyras discovered the abomination he had unknowingly committed. What does a man do when confronted with the unbearable weight of divine punishment? There was no reasoning, no redemption, only rage. His love for his daughter twisted into hatred, his grief into fury. Mira, barely able to breathe beneath the weight of her own shame, did the only thing she could. She ran through the halls of the palace, past the gardens that once felt like home, into the unknown. But could she truly outrun the will of the gods? She did not ask for salvation. She asked for escape, a plea so desperate that the heavens took pity, not enough to free her, but enough to end her suffering in a way no mortal could have predicted. As her breath turned ragged and her legs gave out, the gods answered. Her body hardened, her limbs stretched, her skin cracked. She was no longer flesh and bone. Mira ceased to be a woman and instead became something eternal. A tree, weeping fragrant resin as if mourning what she had lost. Even now, the myrrh tree bleeds, whispering her sorrow into the wind, a silent reminder that beauty and pride are a dangerous combination. But from tragedy, sometimes, the unexpected is born. Deep within the tree's bark, something stirred, a secret waiting to be unveiled, a life forming where none should exist. The gods had cursed Mira, but they were not finished with her yet. From within the hardened prison of her sorrow, a child was growing. And not just any child, one whose beauty would rival even the gods, one who would be born of a tree, loved by goddesses. The complete story of Adonis, the most beautiful man. A forbidden passion. Some fates are crueler than death. Mira, trapped in the clutches of an unnatural desire, did everything in her power to resist, but a curse spun by the gods is a web with no escape. Every moment, every breath, was a torment, a relentless hunger for something she knew was forbidden. She avoided her father's gaze, She prayed for the madness to pass, but Aphrodite's wrath had no mercy. The more she fought, the stronger the desire grew, twisting her thoughts, leaving her sleepless, desperate, and alone. It was a prison not of walls, but of the mind, an inescapable nightmare where she was both the victim and the villain. But even the strongest will has its breaking point. In her agony, Mira turned to the only soul she could trust, her old nursemaid, a woman who had seen too many years to still believe that life was fair. Perhaps out of pity, or perhaps out of fear of what would happen if the curse was left to fester, the nursemaid devised a plan. It was a deception born of shadows, the kind of scheme that could only be spoken in hushed tones. The king would never knowingly commit such an act, so he would not be given a choice. Under the cover of darkness, through whispered words and careful trickery, Mira would be led to her father's bed. The night came, thick with silence. The palace torches flickered, casting long shadows on stone walls, as Mira slipped through corridors that once felt safe. She was blindfolded, whether for secrecy or so she could pretend she did not know what was happening. Even she did not know. The darkness swallowed her, erasing identity, erasing morality, leaving behind only sensation. And so, for 12 nights, she lived a lie. 12 nights where guilt and desire were locked in a battle within her soul. 12 nights where she lost herself, not knowing if she was a victim of fate or its accomplice. But secrets are like embers buried in ash, they never stay hidden for long. On the 12th night, the veil of deception was lifted. King Cinyras, horrified, furious, and broken, finally saw the truth. What does a man do when he realizes he has been made an unwilling pawn in the gods' cruel games? He did not grieve. He did not mourn. He raged. The same hands that once cradled his daughter now reached for his sword. Mira had been his pride, his joy, now she was the source of his greatest shame. He could not undo what had been done, but he could erase the one who had brought it upon him. She ran before he could strike. There was no time for explanations, no chance to beg for understanding. Mira had lived 12 nights in the dark, but now the darkness chased her. Through the cold corridors of the palace, across the moonlit earth, she ran, her heartbeat drowning out the world. She did not know where she was going, only that she could not stop. With every step, she felt the weight of the curse pressing down on her. She had been damned by the gods, but what punishment could be worse than this? But the gods were not finished with her yet. As she fled, her breath ragged, her strength failing, a single thought echoed in her mind. She did not want to die, but she could not live like this. And so, with the last ounce of her will, she did something desperate. She begged for an end. Not for mercy, not for forgiveness, but for transformation. And the gods, in their cold, unfeeling wisdom, answered. Escape and transformation. When a mortal offends the gods, their suffering is rarely swift. Mira, once a princess, now a fugitive, ran as though the wind itself carried her. But no matter how fast she fled, she could not outrun the weight of what had been done. The whispers of the past clung to her skin like a curse, and the cries of her father still echoed in her ears. She had not chosen this fate, yet it consumed her all the same. Her feet bled against the jagged earth, her lungs burned, and still, she ran. Because the alternative, the wrath of the man who had once called her daughter, was far worse. Night after night, she wandered the land, alone, lost, and utterly forsaken. No kingdom would shelter a woman cursed by the gods. No temple would grant her sanctuary. She was a living omen, a walking tragedy, and the world turned its back on her. Hunger gnawed at her ribs, exhaustion clung to her bones, and still, there was no escape. She had once been draped in silks and adorned with gold, but now, she was nothing. The gods had taken everything from her, yet they had not granted her the mercy of an ending. She was a ghost haunting a body she no longer wished to inhabit. Desperate, broken, and with nowhere left to turn, Mira did the only thing left to her. She prayed. Not for redemption, not for forgiveness, but for release. She did not care if it was death or something worse, so long as it meant an end to her suffering. The words spilled from her lips like a final confession, an offering of despair to the heavens above. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, the gods listened. Not with kindness, not with pity, but with the cold, calculating precision that only divine beings possess. They had cursed her once. Now, they would shape her into something new. Her breath caught in her throat as she felt the first tremor beneath her skin. Her legs grew heavy, rooted to the earth. Her arms stiffened, her fingers stretched toward the sky. Her skin darkened, hardened, cracked. The pain was unlike anything she had ever known. But she did not scream, perhaps because her lips, too, were no longer her own. She was becoming something ancient, something eternal. The gods had not freed her from suffering. They had merely changed its form. She would stand in silence for all eternity, her sorrow seeping from her in thick, fragrant tears, the resin of the myrrh tree. And so, Mira was no more. In her place stood a tree, its bark rough with the weight of her grief, its scent a lingering echo of the woman she once was. The world forgot the princess, but the tree remained, weeping endlessly, a silent testament to the cruelty of the gods. But even in tragedy, there are echoes of life waiting to be born. Deep within the heart of the tree, beneath its hardened exterior, something stirred, a secret waiting to be unveiled, a promise wrapped in sorrow. The gods had not only ended Mira's suffering, they had created something new. From within the trunk of the weeping tree, a child would be born. A child whose beauty would make even the gods take notice. A child destined to be born of a tree, loved by goddesses. The complete story of Adonis, the most beautiful man. Birth of Adonis. Not all births are bathed in joy. Some are carved from sorrow, molded by tragedy, and whispered into existence by the gods themselves. Such was the case with Adonis. He did not enter the world through a mother's embrace, but through the bark of a weeping tree, a prison of grief and divine punishment. For months, the hardened trunk bore the weight of an unborn life, the cries of Mira trapped in silence, until the moment came when nature could no longer contain what the gods had set in motion. The tree cracked, split open like the earth before a great storm, and from within, a child emerged. And what a child he was! Even as an infant, Adonis possessed a beauty that defied reason. His skin carried the warmth of the sun. His features were sculpted with the precision of a master artist. His presence was nothing short of divine. Those who witnessed his birth knew instantly, this was no ordinary mortal. This was a being touched by fate, destined to stir the hearts of gods and men alike. The winds whispered his name, the earth sighed beneath him, and even the heavens seemed to pause, as if holding their breath at the arrival of one so unnaturally perfect. But beauty, as always, is both a gift and a curse. A child so breathtaking could not simply be left to the mercy of the mortal world. He needed protection, guidance, and above all, someone to stake a claim over him before another did. And who better to take such a child than the goddess who had started it all? Aphrodite, the orchestrator of Mira's doom, the very being who had set this cruel fate into motion, was the first to lay eyes upon him. And in that instant, something unexpected happened. Aphrodite, the goddess of love and desire, fell victim to her own domain. She did not see a child of tragedy. She saw beauty in its purest form, an existence so radiant it could outshine Olympus itself. But even a goddess could not ignore the dangers of the world. She knew that beauty invited jealousy, that perfection was a prize worth fighting for. And so, rather than raise the child herself, she chose a guardian beyond the reach of mortal or divine interference. She carried Adonis to the underworld, placing him in the care of Persephone, the queen of the dead. There, among the endless shadows and the silent souls of the departed, Adonis would be safe. No war, no mortal greed, no godly scheme could touch him in the realm of the dead. Or so Aphrodite thought, for beauty, even in darkness, cannot be ignored. As Adonis grew, so too did the whispers of his perfection. His presence, a bright and radiant anomaly in the land of the dead, did not go unnoticed. And while Aphrodite believed she had safeguarded him, she had instead placed him in the hands of another goddess, one who would soon refuse to let him go. For love, once awakened, does not easily loosen its grip. And Adonis, born of a tree, loved by goddesses, the complete story of Adonis, the most beautiful man, was about to become the center of a divine struggle that would shake the heavens themselves. Rivalry between goddesses. Even among the gods, beauty is a dangerous thing. It does not inspire admiration. It sparks obsession, rivalry, and war. Adonis, born of a tree, loved by goddesses. The complete story of Adonis, the most beautiful man, was no exception. Aphrodite had hidden him in the underworld, thinking she had secured his safety. But she had underestimated the power of longing. For even in the land of the dead, untouched by the warmth of the sun, Adonis shone too brightly to be ignored. And the one who noticed was none other than Persephone herself, the queen of the underworld, the goddess who had been entrusted with his care. At first, it was simple curiosity. A mortal child in the realm of the dead was an anomaly, something rare enough to pique even the interest of a goddess. But as the years passed, curiosity turned to affection, and affection turned to something deeper. Adonis was no longer just a ward under her protection. He was a treasure, a light in the shadows, a beauty so perfect it seemed unnatural. And when the time came for Aphrodite to reclaim him, Persephone refused. Why should she give up what had become hers? Why should Aphrodite, who had left him behind, now come demanding his return? The heavens trembled with the weight of their dispute. Two goddesses, each unwilling to yield, each claiming the right to Adonis. Love and death stood at odds, locked in a battle that neither could win alone. Aphrodite, the goddess of desire, argued that Adonis was meant to live under the warmth of the sun, to be cherished, adored, and admired by all. Persephone, the queen of the underworld, countered that she had been the one to raise him, to shelter him in his most vulnerable years. He belonged to her, to the quiet world of shadows and eternal rest. The conflict could not be settled by words alone. Such was the nature of the gods. They did not negotiate, they did not compromise, they fought. And as the tension between them grew, the very fabric of existence began to strain under the weight of their discord. The mortal world suffered, crops withered, the seasons faltered, and the balance between life and death wavered. This was no mere quarrel between lovers. This was a war of cosmic consequence. And so, before the heavens themselves were torn apart, Zeus was forced to intervene. The king of the gods, weary of the endless disputes of immortals, made his decree. Adonis would not belong to one goddess alone. Instead, he would be divided, half the year with Persephone in the underworld, the other half with Aphrodite in the world above. A compromise, a balance between light and darkness, love and death. It was a decision that should have ended the conflict, should have brought peace. But the gods are not like mortals. They do not accept loss, and they do not forget. And so, Adonis became a man caught between two worlds, between the pull of love and the grip of the underworld. But even gods cannot control a mortal's heart. And as Adonis walked beneath the sun once more, free from the shadows of the underworld, his fate was already beginning to take shape. Because beauty does not grant protection, it invites danger. And Adonis, for all his perfection, was not beyond the reach of jealousy, of violence, of the cruelty that comes when a man is loved too much. Passion for hunting. Adonis had spent half his life in the realm of the dead, where silence reigned and shadows whispered. But when he walked beneath the sun, the world seemed to call to him with an urgency he had never known. The forests, the rivers, the endless rolling hills, he was drawn to them like a moth to flame. Yet, more than anything, it was the hunt that awakened something deep within him. Perhaps it was the thrill of the chase, the sharp focus of the moment, or the raw power of life and death balanced on the edge of a spear. Whatever it was, Adonis became a hunter, and there was no place he felt more alive than in the heart of the wild. But beauty and danger are often intertwined, and Aphrodite knew this better than anyone. She had fought for Adonis, claimed him as her own, and now she watched in growing fear as he pursued a life that cared nothing for his perfection. Hunting was not a game. It was a brutal test of skill, where death was not merely an idea but a constant presence. Every beast he faced, every corner of the forest he entered, carried the risk of never returning. And for Aphrodite, the thought of losing him, of seeing that beauty marred, of watching his blood stain the earth, was unbearable. She pleaded with him to stop. She warned him of the dangers, told him that the gods had not fought over him just to see him throw his life away in pursuit of the thrill. But Adonis was no child anymore, and he had spent too many years under the rule of others. He had been passed between goddesses like a possession, never given the chance to decide his own fate. Now, he had found something that was truly his, a passion that was not dictated by gods, nor by curses, nor by fate. He would not give it up, not even for the love of Aphrodite. And so, he hunted, his skills sharpened under the watchful eye of Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, who saw in him the makings of a warrior. Under her guidance, he became more than just a man playing at danger. He became a force of nature. His arrows flew swift and true. His steps were silent, his instincts honed. He moved through the wilderness with the confidence of one who belonged there, untouched by fear, unshaken by the warnings of those who claimed to love him. But love, as always, is a fickle thing. It does not protect, it suffocates. And when the gods feel powerless, they do not simply accept their fate. They find ways to take control. Aphrodite saw the path Adonis was walking, and she knew how it would end. She had spent eternity watching mortals fall to their own hubris, believing themselves invincible, believing they could outrun fate. But no man, no matter how beautiful, no matter how beloved, could escape the jealousy of the gods. And deep in the heavens, there was one who had already set his sights on Adonis, not as a lover, but as an enemy, a god whose rage burned hotter than any mortal's passion. Ares, the god of war, had been watching, and he did not take kindly to being replaced. Ares' jealousy. The gods are not known for their patience, nor for their mercy. Ares, the god of war, had long claimed Aphrodite as his lover, their passion as fiery and unrelenting as the battlefield itself. But war is a jealous thing, and when Aphrodite's affections began to drift toward another, Ares did not stand idly by. He had watched in silence as she fought for Adonis, as she defied the will of the gods to claim him, as she spent her days wrapped in the mortal's beauty. And the more he watched, the deeper his rage burned. Love, to Ares, was not a thing to be shared. It was to be conquered, possessed, and ruled without question. Adonis, in his youthful arrogance, was blind to the storm brewing above him. He was not a god, nor a warrior, nor a king. He was a mortal, and yet he had unknowingly made an enemy of one of Olympus' most feared deities. Perhaps he believed that beauty alone was a shield, that Aphrodite's love could protect him from whatever wrath the heavens might send his way. But gods do not settle their disputes with words. Ares would not challenge Adonis to a duel, nor would he demand justice before the halls of Olympus. No, the god of war preferred blood, and he had no intention of making this a fair fight. It is a dangerous thing when a god wishes a mortal dead. There are no rules, no warnings, only inevitability. Ares, unwilling to let Aphrodite choose another over him, devised a plan as brutal as it was cunning. He would not strike Adonis in battle, where glory could soften the sting of death. He would not send an army, for war was too grand a fate for a mere hunter. Instead, he would take the form of something Adonis would never suspect, something that would lure him in with the same thrill he chased every day. A wild boar, massive and bloodthirsty. A beast that no hunter could resist. Ares would use Adonis' own passion against him. And so, the trap was set. In the depths of the forest, where the trees grew thick and the air smelled of damp earth and fallen leaves, the beast waited. Its tusks gleamed like sharpened daggers. Its eyes burned with unnatural fury. It was not an animal, not truly. It was vengeance given flesh, war made manifest in the shape of a creature that Adonis could not ignore. When the hunter finally arrived, bow in hand, gaze alight with the fire of the chase, Ares knew that the game was already won. The boy had been so eager to prove himself, so desperate to carve out his own fate, and now fate had finally come for him. The gods watched in silence, as they often did when tragedy was about to unfold. Aphrodite, perhaps, felt a tremor of unease, but she was not there to stop what was coming. Adonis had spent his life pursued by love, claimed by forces beyond his control, fought over as if he were a prize. But love had never been his greatest threat. War had been waiting in the shadows all along, sharpening its teeth, preparing to strike. And as Adonis raised his spear, as he took that final step toward the beast that was not a beast, he had no way of knowing that he had already lost. Death of Adonis. Fate does not bargain. It does not pause for love, nor does it weep for beauty. And so, as Adonis stood in the wild, face to face with the beast that was not a beast, his destiny closed in around him. The boar charged with terrifying speed, its massive hooves tearing through the earth, tusks gleaming like polished ivory. Adonis was quick. He had hunted countless creatures before, faced danger with the confidence of a man who had never known true fear. But what he did not know, what he could not know, was that this was no ordinary hunt. This was not nature's doing. This was vengeance, divine and merciless, wearing the mask of an animal. His spear flew through the air, striking the beast. But the wound was shallow, it only enraged his enemy further. The boar lunged, faster than any mortal creature should be, and before Adonis could react, he felt it, the sharp, searing pain of tusks tearing into his flesh. It was not a clean wound. It ripped through muscle, dug deep into his side, and when the beast finally pulled away, the damage had already been done. Adonis staggered, his breath coming in sharp gasps, his hands pressing against the gaping wound as warm, crimson life spilled between his fingers. The forest held its breath. The birds did not sing. The wind did not stir. Even the trees, ancient and indifferent, seemed to lean closer, as if bearing witness to the tragedy unfolding before them. Adonis fell to his knees, his strength slipping away with each heartbeat. The pain was distant now, drowned beneath the cold realization that this was the end. He had spent his life caught between two worlds, between love and death, but there would be no return this time. There was no goddess coming to rescue him, no divine compromise to spare his life. Ares had made sure of that. Far away, in the realm of gods, Aphrodite felt it, a sharp, agonizing pull at the core of her being, a sorrow so overwhelming that it shattered the peace of Olympus itself. She did not need to be told what had happened, she knew. With a cry that shook the heavens, she descended to the mortal world, racing through the skies, her golden chariot tearing through the clouds. But love, no matter how swift, is never fast enough to outrun death. When she reached him, he was already slipping away. She fell to her knees beside him, cradling his broken body, her hands trembling as they brushed his blood-streaked face. "Stay," she whispered, as if love alone could hold him to the earth, as if her voice could undo the cruelty of fate. But Adonis, the man born of a tree, loved by goddesses, the complete story of Adonis, the most beautiful man, was already beyond her reach. His breath grew shallow, his gaze unfocused, and with one last sigh, the light faded from his eyes. Aphrodite did not scream. She did not rage. The goddess who had fought wars for love, who had defied Olympus itself for this man, simply held him in silence. Her tears fell, mingling with his blood, soaking into the earth that had stolen him from her. But love does not fade so easily. Love, like beauty, finds a way to linger. And as the first drop of divine sorrow touched the soil, something stirred. Because even in death, Adonis' story was not yet over. Transformation into a flower. Love does not surrender, even when the body fails. Aphrodite, draped in sorrow, held Adonis' lifeless form, her golden hands stained with the deep crimson of his blood. It pooled beneath him, sinking into the thirsty earth, a stark contrast to the once vibrant man she had adored. But gods do not grieve as mortals do. Their sorrow bends the laws of nature, their mourning reshapes the world itself. And so, where others would have found only loss, Aphrodite found a way to make him eternal. She would not let the ground claim him. Not completely. She had fought for him in life, and she would fight for him in death. As her tears fell upon his wounds, she whispered a final plea, not to Zeus, not to Hades, but to the earth itself. Let him not be forgotten. Let his beauty linger. Let his essence remain. And the earth, perhaps moved by her grief, perhaps out of respect for the tragedy it had witnessed, obeyed. From the very place where Adonis' blood had soaked the ground, something began to bloom. At first, it was a whisper of green against the red-stained soil, fragile, delicate, as if hesitating to exist. But then, as Aphrodite watched, the first petals unfurled, a brilliant red, the color of love and loss intertwined. It was a flower unlike any other, born not from mere nature, but from sorrow and devotion. An anemone, its fragile petals trembling in the wind, its beauty fleeting, just as Adonis had been. A flower that would bloom only briefly before the wind scattered it away. A reminder that even the most breathtaking things are never meant to last. Aphrodite reached out, her fingers grazing the petals with the same tenderness she once reserved for Adonis himself. This was all that remained of him now. A fragile bloom. A testament to the love that had defied gods and fate alike. And yet, there was something poetic in it. Just as Adonis had spent his life caught between two worlds, between love and death, so too would this flower exist in that delicate balance. It would bloom each year, but never for long, fading just as quickly as it arrived. A cycle of beauty and loss, love and sorrow, rebirth and farewell. The world would remember him, though not as he had once been. He would not be the hunter, nor the lover, nor the man fought over by goddesses. He would be the flower that rose from grief, the bloom that told of passion and tragedy. And though Aphrodite could not bring him back, she could ensure that he was never truly gone. She had lost him, but in a way, she had also made him immortal. But the gods were not yet finished with Adonis, for even in death, he was still claimed by more than one. The underworld still held its grip on him, and soon, another would come to demand what she believed was hers. For Persephone, queen of the dead, had not forgotten the man who once walked her realm. And love, no matter how fierce, does not break the laws of the gods so easily. Dispute over his soul. Death, in the mortal world, is an ending. But in the realm of the gods, it is merely another battlefield. Adonis had taken his last breath, his blood had birthed a flower, and yet, his fate was still not his own. Two goddesses had fought for him in life, and now they would fight for him in death. Aphrodite, unwilling to let go, wept over his fragile body, her grief so great that the very sky darkened. But beneath the earth, in the depths of the underworld, Persephone was waiting. Adonis had once belonged to her, spent half his life in her realm, and she was not so willing to surrender what she considered hers. The ground trembled as the queen of the dead emerged from her silent kingdom, stepping into the world of the living with the authority of one who ruled death itself. She had been patient while he walked the earth, but patience was not the same as surrender. He has died, she said, her voice as cold as the river Styx, and what is dead belongs to me. Her claim was undeniable. No mortal escaped the underworld, not without permission. Adonis, by all divine law, should have been hers forever now. But Aphrodite was not a goddess who accepted loss. She had already watched him slip through her fingers once. She would not let the underworld take him completely. His soul is not meant to fade in darkness, she argued, her voice sharp with defiance. He was loved, not just by me, but by the world above. He deserves more than an eternity in shadow. It was a plea, but it was also a challenge. A warning that this would not be settled easily. The heavens watched, the gods listened, and the weight of their conflict shook the balance of existence itself. Zeus, weary of yet another divine quarrel, was forced to intervene. The king of the gods had no patience for endless disputes over mortals, no matter how beautiful they were. He called upon both goddesses, demanding an end to their conflict. And so, just as he had in life, Adonis was divided in death. He will spend half the year in the underworld, Zeus decreed, and the other half in the world above. A balance between love and death, between the warmth of Aphrodite's embrace and the cold grasp of Persephone's realm. It was not a perfect resolution, but it was the only one that would keep Olympus from war. And so it was that Adonis became more than just a man, he became a cycle, a force of nature itself. When he returned to the earth, life flourished, the flowers bloomed, the world awakened with beauty and desire. But when his time came to return to the underworld, the world dimmed, the flowers wilted, and the air grew heavy with sorrow. His presence, and his absence, shaped the rhythm of the world, mirroring the eternal dance between love and loss. Yet, even as the gods reached their compromise, mortals did not forget. They had watched as the heavens battled over a single man, had seen how love could defy even death itself. And so, they began to tell his story, to honor his memory in a way that even the gods had not foreseen. Because legends are not merely spoken, they are lived. And the story of Adonis, born of a tree, loved by goddesses, the complete story of Adonis, the most beautiful man, was far from over. Cult of Adonis. Mortal hearts are drawn to tragedy, to stories of love lost and beauty stolen too soon. Adonis was not just a man, he was a symbol, a tale of desire and death woven so deeply into the fabric of the world that it could never be forgotten. His story became more than myth, it became ritual. Across the ancient world, from the temples of Greece to the distant shores of the Near East, his name was whispered in reverence. Women wept for him, as Aphrodite had once wept, mourning his death as if it had happened before their very eyes. But mourning was never the end of the tale. Just as the gods had split his time between life and the underworld, so too did his followers believe in his eternal return. The cult of Adonis flourished, not in grand temples like those of Zeus or Apollo, but in intimate, secretive gatherings, where women, in particular, took center stage. They would plant small gardens, vessels of life meant to grow quickly and die just as fast, mirroring the fleeting nature of Adonis himself. These Adonis gardens were nurtured with love, their shoots reaching toward the sun in a desperate bid for survival, only to wither within days. It was a lesson written in the soil. Beauty fades, passion burns bright but brief, and even the most cherished things cannot escape the cycle of life and death. His festivals were raw, emotional, filled with wailing and ritual grief, as if the very earth was reliving his passing each year. Women tore their garments, beat their chests, and let their sorrow echo into the heavens, reenacting Aphrodite's pain as she cradled her dying lover. But just as the mourning reached its peak, something miraculous happened. Joy followed. Adonis, though lost, was not gone forever. As the seasons changed, as the flowers bloomed once more, he was reborn, just as the world awakened after winter's grip. Life, death, and rebirth, the eternal cycle he had come to embody. Yet Adonis was more than just a tragic figure. He was a reminder that passion is worth the pain, that beauty is precious because it does not last. His cult was not one of conquest or dominance, like those of Ares or Zeus, but of love and loss, of embracing the impermanence of all things. It resonated deeply with those who understood the fragility of life, with those who had loved and lost, and with those who knew that even the most divine love cannot hold back time. His worship spread beyond Greece, blending with the ancient deities of the Near East, where he was linked to Tammuz, another young god of fertility and renewal who died too soon. His name may have changed, his story adapted to new lands, but the essence remained. The beautiful youth who was taken too soon, the lover fought over by goddesses, the man whose very existence shaped the world. Even as empires rose and fell, as gods were forgotten and new ones took their place, Adonis endured, his legend whispered through the ages. And so, the tale of Adonis lived on, not just in the heavens, nor in the underworld, but in the hearts of those who told his story. He had been born of a tree, loved by goddesses, the complete story of Adonis, the most beautiful man. But was he a mere mortal, or something more? The world may never know for certain. What remains is the lesson he left behind, the understanding that love, no matter how fleeting, is what makes life worth living. The legacy of Adonis, a beauty that defied the gods. Adonis' story is more than just myth, it's a lesson woven into the fabric of time. He was born of a tree, loved by goddesses, the complete story of Adonis, the most beautiful man. Yet his fate was never truly his own. His beauty, the very thing that set him apart, became his curse. It ignited passion, sparked rivalry, and in the end, led him to a tragic demise. But was he merely a pawn of the gods, or something more? Think about it. How many times in history have we seen mortals rise, only to be torn down by those who cannot bear to share the spotlight? Power, beauty, and influence are never without cost. Adonis' story is not just about love, it's about the dangers of desire, the fleeting nature of perfection, and the way even gods struggle to control what they claim to own. So now I ask you, if you were given a gift so rare, so extraordinary, that the world itself could not look away. Would you embrace it? Or would you fear the price that comes with it? Adonis' fate may have been sealed by the gods, but what about yours? If you want to uncover more untold myths, lost legends, and stories that shake the very foundation of what we think we know, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. There's a world of forgotten truths waiting to be explored, and you won't want to miss what's coming next.